So once again, putting myself in my secondary stance opens up some other techniques. One of the favourites in here that I've taught a lot is the Zabit. Okay, so the Zabit is if you stand exactly. Now, if I'm in my primary stance, the Zabit is almost out. I can't do it. What it is a no grip Osotogari across the body here like this. So I need the same stance as him. So if you can see here my primary stance, that's not going to work out. If I can successfully shift through and disguise it, and now I'm in the same stance as him, I can start to hit my Zabit, my no grip Osotogari. Okay. So however you get there is completely up to you. What you do need is that little bit of space in between. So when you shift, you don't want to be too much on top of him. So it's absolutely fine if he backs away in this. All we're using the shift for is the disguise to get to our opposite stance. So we can start back here, I jab cross, he backs away. I've all of a sudden changed my stance. I've distracted him enough with the hands where he didn't read it. Okay. Now I'm comfortable in my opposite stance. I can busy his hands, and now I can begin my takedown. So I'm making a back step, and my hands are clubbing, and I want to steer him over this way. This is the leg I'm going to chop. I want to put his body weight over that. So normally I'll use it as like a collar tie and club the outside. Of course, when I busy his hands, especially when he shells up, that's particularly good because now I can use both sides to steer him. Okay, so a collar tie and just collapse the elbow. So busy the hands, I back step in, and then we're chopping behind this leg here. One leg is absolutely fine. If you're long-legged, you might feel that you can get through to the far one. Again, that's fine. It's not absolutely necessary. All we need to be is here. Okay, and everything is pointing in the same direction here. I want to put myself basically in a sprinting position. So as I back step in, you see here that everything is pointing in the same direction. I've lent his body weight over. That's very important. If I get to him here like this and he's in good shape, he actually Osotogari's me. So it's important that when I switch my stance here like this and I club, I send all the weight over this leg here. So if I shift, I could be all the way out here. I might purposely be out of range, but enough just to scare him a little bit. I've disguised him, I back step in, club and steer, and then chop behind. Like I said, I've tilted his body weight over, I put everything in a sprinting position, and now I can just run it through. So he can actually move back on my jab cross shift. Doesn't matter, I've disguised it, and then we can land our Osotogari. Like I said, if I'm on top of him, when I shift, it's going to open other things up. If he moves back, now I've changed my stance, we can hit our Osotogari. So now we're going to change our shift. So rather than a full step through, which is very good for closing distance, we're going to make a switch step. Like this, okay? So usually on this one, we're going to stay within the same footprint. So if I'm here like this, I'm not really going to move forwards or backwards. If anything, I might move forward a little bit, but we can stay within the same footprint. So why is this good to use? Well, some people just don't back up. If he was constantly moving away from me, hitting a switch step now is pointless. I'd have to chase him down. So if he moved back, I'd be making this full step through. But if he stays here like this, I can quickly change my stance, put my head to the outside, change my footwork, and be in my opposite stance. Okay? So I switch step. Me personally, I don't do it as a jump. I want to be a bit more dynamic. So the lead leg drags back, and then I step through. The important thing to do with switch steps is not land too long. So it's very common with newer guys, they'll switch and they'll end up much longer than they were before. This makes it harder to start shifting body weight. Okay? So it can be quite short, like I said, you want to be within the same footprint. So if my back foot is here, it doesn't really want to go further than that. And like I said, it doesn't necessarily have to go that far. I might make a short drag and then a step. And because we're using our drop shift here with punches, I'm not going to angle my foot out. It is very common with a switch kick. I land with the foot turned out and it allows the hips to turn. When we're traveling forward like this, it's going to be straight lining, okay? And again, I want to disguise this as much as possible, so we're going to piece it together with a jab. And it's important that the hands and the feet are synchronized. I don't want to go 1, 2. I'm going to land it at the same time as that foot lands. So it's dragging it back and then landing. Normally when I'm doing it, I'm trying to put the head off center line out here, and you'll see normally we're loaded up on the other side. So this now becomes particularly good at hitting the body or the hook on this side. So if I switch that jab, my foot has come outside, I'm loaded up to hit the body here or the high hook. So drop shift, this time he's not moving back. Sometimes he might even be coming towards me. We can hit the body on this side or come up with the hook. Again, we can start piecing this up and start creating angles like we talked about earlier. So when I drop shift and I land this hook, I can now step, pivot, create the angle, or L step out and create an angle. On the drop shift, we might, as the name suggests, we might change level and drop a little bit. That's absolutely fine. What you don't want to do is leave yourself too exposed and start dragging down trail hands here, where he might start countering with uppercuts, hooks, knees, kicks. So stay nice and disciplined, cover high and tight. Foot stays straight. We're not going to open the foot out like this, okay? And try and piece it together with some sort of angle change. So now using our drop shift, the punching hand now becomes a posting hand. All I essentially want to do is push him backwards, okay? And that could be on the head, it could be on the chest. You can just use the hand like this, here like this, just to ever so slightly put the weight on his back leg. So on our drop shift, it now becomes a post to send his weight back. I'm putting myself in a sprint position. So again, when I switch, I'm not turning the foot out. In a sprint position to run through on the single leg. It doesn't matter what stance he's in. He could be orthodox, southpaw. The leg is going to be available. It just changes where I scoop it up from. So from an orthodox, I'm going to scoop the leg from the outside. Push the weight onto the back leg. I sprint through and scoop up that leg. If he changed his stance, I drop shift. I'm now scooping up from the inside and passing it. So this one, you want to put yourself in a real sprint, like very dynamic position. So from here, posting, and then running it through. We want to be able to sprint right through your opponent. Okay, so not just stopping and trying to pick this leg up and driving through. This leg is going to become very light. So it's a drop shift. Posting, it could be on the head, on the chest, it doesn't matter, it sends his weight to the back leg and we can pick up that leg. However you want to finish from here is absolutely fine. You start running the pipe, you start shelving it, you get to the hip, all your options. So on this one we're going to use our drop shift to land a very heavy outside leg kick. Okay, so in this scenario he's orthodox, I hit my drop shift, now I'm going to shift back through with a big open step, out and across. Takes my head off center line and it drives me through the target to make a very heavy low leg kick. Of course, if he was southpaw and I end up out here, I either get very good contact on the inside leg kick, or if you just rotate a little bit, the whole body, it turns into a double leg chop. So if I drop shift and I open step out, we end up chopping both legs. You want to do it just above the knee so it straightens them out, like this, and it folds them. So it doesn't matter what stance he's in, I drop shift, now I make that full step through with what is now the trail leg, and land my chopping kick. Again, when you're comfortable with it, the kick could go anywhere. So I could send it up high, especially when you feint the head going down low. You might start reading takedowns, and you go up high with the kick. But we use our drop shift to sell. Now I can really make that full step and get lots of power onto the kick. So now we're specifically going to use our drop shift, our switch step level footwork against a charging opponent. So this time the guy is coming towards me. Maybe I don't want to back up, maybe I don't have the room to back up, so rather than moving backwards or circling, we hit that drop shift, switch step, but we're going to purposely do it with a big open step. So now all this space becomes much more available. Okay, so as your partner walks towards, rather than staying put and having crowd, he walks towards and I step out. Of course, we'll always try and put it together with something else, so we can continue to use that switch step jab, or we could actually turn it into a hook. The important thing is now I switch my stance and my foot ends up outside. Now we can use one of our extra movements to create even more space. So whether that be a pivot or an L step, it doesn't matter, okay? So as he walks towards, 1, 2, and I've created all the space to exit. It doesn't matter, I could be pivoting out, L stepping out. As long as he comes towards me, I end up off centre line. I could even piece it together. I'm a big fan of adding check hooks, so I'm pivoting as I throw the hook. Okay, this is actually a good way to steer them into the corner, especially if you work with boxing rings into this corner here. As I come out here, I can actually steer him into it. So as he walks towards, a drop shift, open step. That's very important. I don't want to straight step it because now he ends up on top of me, which is not what I want. I'm out, and then I can exit with an L step. So again, let's change our shift. We've done the same side shift, a right punch, right step. We've done a drop shift, where we switch our stance and we stay within the same footprint. Now we're doing an opposite side shift. Okay, so my trail leg is going to step, but this time the left is punching, kind of like a drop shift. But on this one, I'm traveling forward. So again, this is very good to use against retreating opponents. If I'm punching every time he walks backwards, yeah, I need to cover that distance. Okay? So how I want to do this one, especially with the rear leg stepping through, I need to take a weight off of that foot so that I can step through. Same principles, I can make a straight step, or I can make an open step. Cross stepping becomes a little trickier. I'll explain why in a minute. But as I step here, now it's the left side that is punching. This is the one that confuses a bit of people. I think it's because it's both sides of the body working at the same time, okay? So head travels to the inside, the weight is now off the rear leg, and now I can step through and I punch at the same time. So the head comes across, step, punch. It's important that the foot and the punch land at the same time. Okay, so this now becomes the driving foot and then through. And then it works off the opposite side as well. So as I step and punch, I now step with the trail leg and punch on the opposite side. So with the partner, as I shift my head to the inside, step and punch, step and punch, step and punch. How I put my head to the inside, I can do a whole bunch of different ways. I can literally just turn my body here almost like I'm slipping. The mechanics are the same if I actually threw a punch. So now I step right, punch left. I might be pretending to load up on a punch here. I might actually load up, but it doesn't matter. I put my head to the inside. I can now step with this one and punch with this one. So with a partner, he's going to continue to walk back. I might just slip my head inside. 1, 2. I'm actually throw right straight. Now the shift begins. And we're going to generally, like I said, make these full steps, maybe an open step. Not really a cross step. When I punch with the left and I cross step, you end up two things going opposite directions. It doesn't really work. So on this one, usually it's going to be a straight step or an open step. Now your drill for this is just to do lengths of stepping right, punching left, and then the opposite. So if I start from this side, we can do it with a partner, without a partner, doesn't matter. I just step and punch. And at the beginning, it will feel and look very robotic if I do it on my own for a second. Two opposite sides working together. Okay. The big thing with this as well is not to turn it too karate-ish. So a lot of people end up dragging this punch here, especially when they get chasing. Okay, so we have to stay disciplined with the hand position, covering high and tight as we do it. Of course, the better you get at it, you just naturally flow from one side to the other. A very good example of this was Vitor Belfort against Wanderlei Silva. So in straight lines, Levi's going to do it, you got it. So he's going to slip his head to the inside. Good, now he's going to step right, punch left, step. Exactly, and you can see the distance he's covering with the punches. If we compare that with just like a normal gallop, where he stays in stance, I can end up winning the race sometimes. Okay, so on this one he's going to make a full step through, so let's start it this time with a punch. So he's going to go right straight, step and punch, step and punch. Exactly. One thing to be careful on this is constantly traveling in straight lines we can get undone a few times. So what we have to be careful of is people just level changing and getting underneath. So we have to be wary of how long we're doing this, how much space they're running out of. Eventually we might need to find an angle and use an L step or a pivot, or we might need to change our attacks and maybe come up the middle with a punch. Like I said, it's very common that when people chase, they walk onto takedowns. So he might start on the end of it, put in a knee. So he's got something coming up. So if you slip your head to the inside, yes, he can finish on a knee. So if we ever do encounter someone pulling them on and looking for that level change, yeah, we've got things coming up from underneath as well. So important things to remember on this one. We bring the weight off the rear leg, we step and we punch on opposite sides. Same again, pushing through. It is my preference that the head comes slightly off center line and we load up on the next punch. So rather than staying square, turn everything through. And you'll see here I'm slightly loaded up on the other side. One more time, me to you. So this sort of straight line attack, I generally refer to as the blitz. It should be very, very sudden and on top right away, overloading the person with punches. And we can use that, like I said, with the opposite side shift. 1, 2, I can actually initiate it with a switch step. So I can use my drop shift and then begin to run through. So when we do this as a partner drill, it should be very quick, very sudden, and on top of the guy right away. So me to you, like I said, I can use it as a left-right shift to initiate, or it could be a little bit more sudden, I can use that drop shift. Who we saw use this very well was Masvidal against Till. He actually changed the first punch into a hook, which is absolutely fine. Again, we're dealing with range. If he's far away, a jab might work great. If he's on top of me a little bit, I can set it up with the hook. I've done the same thing. I've drop shifted, changed the stance, put myself in a nice sprint position, and then I can step through on the other punch. So our next major way of shifting is off of kicks. Okay, so we can land in our opposite stance off of either side kick. It just depends what I do after I've landed the kick. Okay, so normally when we kick, we're going to retract the leg, land back in our stance. Essentially, that's what we're going to do. There's one other variation as well. We'll deal with the retraction of the kick first. Okay, so normally you're gonna shift off of kicks when you've actually scored and landed a kick. If I throw a kick and he moves out of range and I miss the kick, I could land in my opposite stance, but generally what it means is you land slightly out of position. Okay, so generally on kicks you're actually going to score and land a nice solid kick. Okay, so let's go with my rear leg first. So when I throw the kick, I'm going to pull it all the way back, and then all I'm doing is just making that extra step and walking it back into southpaw. So this would mean I've created enough distraction just to land myself into southpaw, and then I can work in whatever combinations I want to do. Okay, and the same would be on my left side. It's all to do with the retraction of the kick. So if I'm starting in my primary stance in orthodox, when I throw my left kick, generally again we're just going to walk it back into the stance. When I retract it now, I'm just going to land in southpaw. So off of the lead kick, it could be any style of kick, it could be a full step through. Again, we could shift into it. But when I retract it, now I'm landing in southpaw. If, again, like normally we could throw that kick, just walk it back, land in primary, or I can throw it and then land in my secondary stance. Same with the other one. When I retract it on this side, this one on my right side, the leg is already behind me, so I need to make an extra step back. Okay. The benefits of this one sometimes, especially on this rear side, is it creates a little bit more distance between us. So 1, 2, and it starts to encourage the guy to walk onto us. And we can time that quite well. It's actually very effective. I call it pulling on. So especially when I score big. Some guys, they get hit and they want payback right away. So when I land and I walk it back and he starts walking on, I'll actually pull him onto punches or whatever attack. So off the left side, one step back into southpaw. On my right side, a full walk back into stance. So our next method off of kicking is to drag down the kick. So rather than retracting the kick from where it came from and walking it back, I'm dragging it down in front of me. Now I have to use this quite carefully. If I'm dragging down my kick without much purpose, what I end up doing is just kind of falling forward. You see beginners do this all the time. They'll land a kick and they land with the foot in front, no balance, and they can't attack or defend very well, okay? So normally it's done with intent and purpose. When I land the kick, I'm just dropping it down in front. Okay, well balanced. Obviously if he moves out of the way, that's really going to step back. I don't want to become stretched. Okay, because now again, look, I'm too stretched. He can attack me, I can't really defend that well, and I can't attack, okay? So when I do land it, I want to drop it down and land well balanced. Now if he doesn't move, if he stands his ground, what you're going to find is you really end up closing the distance. So be prepared to clinch up, or particularly on these drag downs, land with a strike. You see this all the time in Muay Thai, where they're landing the kick and they're using it to drop in with elbows and clinch. Okay. On my lead side here, again, I can still work that drag down, but my left leg is already in front. So it works very well for closing the distance, but it means I haven't shifted. So it's absolutely fine. Of course, I might shift here, throw the kick, then drag it down. So I have change and I can use that, okay? So all we're doing is a drag down rather than retracting the kick. I land and drop it down. If he stays where he is, I've closed the distance. I can start landing in elbows, that's a particularly good one. Here or in the clinch. Or if he does kind of walk back, I've landed right here. And then you can put in all your other techniques. Dragging it down. So now we're going to talk about back shifting, moving backwards while changing stance, okay? Normally this one is going to be used obviously when they're attacking and I want to keep or create distance. Obviously if I just stand my ground and he ends up on top of me, that's pointless. So I want to be able to move back, and sometimes moving back in stance isn't going to be as quick obviously as these full back shifts, okay? Plus I can utilise exiting on both sides, which we'll talk about, okay? So remember what I said, usually the emphasis is on keeping and creating distance. So the main thing is I want to move my feet first, okay? So my lead foot now drags back and then starts to step behind. So just like walking backwards. Of course, we want to put as much into it as we can. So if we can add striking as well, especially if he's chasing, people get a little bit lazy when they chase, the hands drop a little bit, they start reaching, okay? So it's a good opportunity to start adding in the strike. So remember, it's the footwork first. Once this foot gets underneath me, then the punch can begin. So as it starts kicking backwards, that's when the punch will go. Okay, same on the other one. Once that lands now, I'm now putting the weight on the back foot. The back shift starts first. When the foot starts getting underneath me, that's when the punch will go. So we end up covering, if you stay there for the moment, big distance. And me personally, I prefer these straight punches because we keep that range. Of course, there's nothing to say we couldn't hook or uppercut, that's absolutely fine. I actually advise throwing in uppercuts and knees every now and then, just so that we're avoiding his level changes and varying the strikes, okay? So as a drill, your partner can walk towards you just in a straight line. As a glove drill, we can just put the hands up here like this. So as he walks towards, I back shift first. It's the feet first, okay? So rather than 1, 2, I want to keep and create distance, punch and land, foot goes first. Once it gets underneath me and starts pushing out back, then I can land with the punch. Like I said, I advise straight punches out nice and long to keep and create the distance. And he comes towards me. So one more time, we'll go the whole distance. In my stance, he starts rushing. And again, like we talked about earlier, going in straight lines for too long, you can come unstuck a little bit. Eventually you're going to walk into the ropes or the cage. So what I do advise is breaking it up with strikes coming in from underneath or exiting at angles. So once I get to here, I can step and pivot. I might L step out, whatever you want, but try and get used to that. Like I said, there's a drill just to get used to it. Very straight line, you can cover lots of distance. But in truth, you only really want to take 2-3 steps because eventually you're going to find the wall or the rope eventually. So get used to, as the guy's coming towards you, every now and then, finding a bit of an angle, using your pivots or your L steps.